So, unless you're living under a rock, Trump has decided to throw Ukraine under the bus and suck up to Putin. And so did Elon Musk, who at the moment is having meltdowns since people are making community notes he doesn't like and claims they're abusing them, so he wants to fix them. Which would defeat the purpose of the community notes, and it's also very contradictory. Trump's statements are also completely false. I'm no liberal, in case you're wondering. You can check a video I made a few months ago about my thoughts about the US election if you don't believe me. I don't even hate Elon. But this is complete hypocrisy and pushing Kremlin propaganda. But enough about me. Let's rather ask Musk's platform, or better said, his AI, called Grok. And Grok just now has also a new version, which Elon can't shut up about. Apparently it's very based. So, let's ask Grok what he thinks about the statements made about Ukraine, Zelensky, and the double standards that are showing from Musk, Trump, and those who worship them like gods. All I will say is, get the popcorn ready.
Who started the Ukraine-Russia war that is currently ongoing. The ongoing Ukraine-Russia war, often traced back to Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 and escalating significantly with the full-scale invasion on February 24, 2022, was initiated by Russia under the leadership of President Vladimir Putin. Ukraine, led by President Volodymyr Zelensky since 2019, did not initiate the conflict but has been defending itself against Russian aggression. The war's origins can be pinned to Russia's actions, driven by Putin's stated aim to prevent Ukraine from drifting out of Russia's sphere of influence, as articulated in his 2021 essay on the historical unity of Russians and Ukrainians, where he denied Ukraine's legitimacy as a sovereign state. While some argue the West's policies, like NATO expansion, provoked Russia, the direct responsibility rests with Russia for crossing borders and starting the armed conflict. Ukraine's resistance, supported by Western aid, has been a response, not a cause. Can elections happen in Ukraine while the country is in an ongoing war? In Ukraine, elections during an ongoing war are heavily restricted due to the imposition of martial law. Following Russia's full-scale invasion on February 24, 2022, President Volodymyr Zelensky declared martial law under Ukraine's constitution, Article 77, and the Law on the Legal Regime of Martial Law, number 389-8, 2015. This legal framework suspends regular electoral processes during wartime to ensure national security and governance continuity. Specifically, the Constitution prohibits holding parliamentary elections during martial law, and while it's less explicit about presidential elections, the martial law legislation effectively postpones all elections until the state of emergency ends. Practically, wartime conditions, millions displaced, occupied territories, and soldiers at the front make fair and secure voting unfeasible. Ukraine's Central Election Commission has halted preparations, and the law requires elections to occur no earlier than 100 days after martial law lifts for parliament and within a similar post-war window for the presidency. Critics, including some Western voices and Russian propaganda, question Zelensky's legitimacy post-May 2024, but Ukraine's legal framework prioritizes stability over electoral timelines during existential threats. Once martial law ends, elections must resume, with the constitution ensuring the Rada's term extends 6 months post-war and the president's until a new vote. So, no, elections can't happen now. They're on hold until the war subsides. Who has given Ukraine a higher amount of aid? US or Europe/EU? List the total value in dollars next to each other. Europe/EU has given Ukraine more aid than the US. Europe/EU, $148.5 billion US, $113 billion. Would it be hypocritical if the US abandons support for Ukraine and dismisses Ukraine's territorial integrity in regards to the 1994 Budapest Memorandum? Yes, it could be seen as hypocritical if the US abandoned support for Ukraine and dismissed its territorial integrity in light of the 1994 Budapest Memorandum. The memorandum, signed by the US, UK, and Russia, with Ukraine, Belarus, and Kazakhstan as recipients, was a deal where Ukraine gave up its nuclear arsenal, then the world's third largest, in exchange for security assurances. These included commitments to respect Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and borders, and to refrain from the threat or use of force against its territorial integrity, as outlined in the document's points 1 and 2. Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 and the 2022 invasion blatantly violated this, while the U.S. has since positioned itself as a defender of Ukraine's sovereignty, providing billions in aid and framing its support as upholding international norms tied to the memorandum. If the U.S. reversed course, say, by cutting aid or signaling indifference to Ukraine's territorial losses, it would undermine its own stated principles. Are the claims Trump made about Ukraine and Zelensky factual? Let's evaluate the claims made by Donald Trump in the X post dated February 20th, 2025, regarding Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and U.S. aid. I'll assess each major assertion based on my knowledge, focusing on factual accuracy as of early 2025. 1. Zelensky talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that couldn't be won, that never had to start, but a war that he, without the U.S. and Trump, will never be able to settle. Factual assessment. U.S. aid amount. Trump claims $350 billion in U.S. spending on Ukraine's war. As of early 2025, the U.S. has provided approximately $113 billion in aid to Ukraine since 2022, including military, economic, and humanitarian assistance. Per Congressional Research Service estimates, this figure is significantly lower than $350 billion, so the claim is inaccurate and exaggerated. War initiation. The war began with Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 and escalated with the 2022 invasion, initiated by Vladimir Putin, not Zelensky. Ukraine has been defending itself, not starting the conflict, so the suggestion that Zelensky talked the U.S. into the war is misleading. U.S. support followed Russia's aggression, not Ukrainian provocation. Winnability. Whether the war couldn't be won is subjective. Ukraine, with Western aid, has regained territory, e.g., Kherson, parts of Kharkiv, and resisted Russia's advance, but the conflict remains stalemated. Trump's assertion ignores Ukraine's defensive success and ongoing resistance. Settlement without Trump/U.S. Zelensky has expressed willingness to negotiate but insists on territorial integrity per his 2024 peace formula. Trump's claim that only he can settle the war lacks evidence, as no concrete negotiations or outcomes are detailed in his post. U.S. aid has been crucial, but Europe provides more, $148.5 billion, per your earlier question. Verdict: largely false. U.S. aid is overstated, and the war's origin and settlement dynamics are misrepresented. Point 2. The United States has spent $200 billion more than Europe, and Europe's money is guaranteed, while the United States will get nothing back. Factual assessment. Aid comparison. As noted earlier, Europe/EU has provided $148.5 billion, while the U.S. has given $113 billion. Trump's claim that the U.S. spent $200 billion more is incorrect. Europe has actually given more, by about $35.5 billion. This is factually wrong. Guaranteed versus no return. European aid includes grants and loans, some of which Ukraine must repay, while U.S. aid is mostly grants, e.g., military equipment, humanitarian aid, with no expectation of direct repayment. However, some U.S. aid, e.g., Presidential Drawdown Authority, involves replacing stockpiles, indirectly benefiting U.S. defense industries. Trump's framing oversimplifies, but the nothing back claim is partially misleading, as U.S. aid supports strategic interests, e.g., countering Russia. Verdict: false. The aid figures are inverted, and the nothing back claim distorts the strategic benefits of U.S. support. Point 3. Sleepy Joe Biden demand equalization, and that this war is far more important to Europe than it is to us. We have a big, beautiful ocean as separation. Factual assessment. Biden's position. Biden has emphasized burden sharing, urging Europe to increase aid, but there's no public record of him demanding equalization in the exact terms Trump describes. Both regions see the war as critical, Europe due to proximity and energy security, the U.S. due to NATO commitments and countering Russian expansion. Trump's ocean as separation downplays U.S. strategic interest in European stability. Importance. The war directly threatens Europe, e.g., energy, refugees, but the U.S. views it as vital to global security and NATO, per Biden's 2022 statements. Trump's framing minimizes U.S. stakes. Verdict: misleading. Biden hasn't demanded equalization as stated, and the war's importance to the U.S. is understated. Point 4. Zelensky admits that half of the money we sent him is missing. Factual assessment. There's no credible evidence or public admission from Zelensky stating that half of U.S. aid is missing. Ukraine has faced corruption allegations, and some U.S. lawmakers, e.g., Republicans in 2023, raised concerns about aid oversight, prompting audits, e.g., by the U.S. Government Accountability Office. However, no major reports confirm that half is unaccounted for. Zelensky has emphasized transparency, and Ukraine's anti-corruption measures, e.g., NABU, SAPO, have prosecuted graft cases, but Trump's claim lacks substantiation. Verdict: false. No evidence supports this specific claim. Point 5. He refuses to have elections is very low in Ukrainian polls, and the only thing he was good at was playing Biden like a fiddle. Factual assessment: elections. As discussed earlier, elections are legally suspended under martial law since 2022, not refused by Zelensky. This is a wartime necessity, not a personal choice, per Ukraine's constitution and martial law laws. Polls: Zelensky's approval ratings have dropped due to war fatigue and economic strain. In late 2024, polls, e.g., Kyiv International Institute of Sociology, showed his approval around 60%, down from 90% in 2022. But very low is subjective. He remains popular compared to rivals like Poroshenko, though opposition exists. Playing Biden: this is rhetorical and lacks evidence. Biden's support for Ukraine reflects U.S. policy, not manipulation by Zelensky. Zelensky's advocacy, e.g., 2022 U.S. visits, was strategic, but playing like a fiddle is hyperbolic and unproven. Verdict: partially misleading. Elections are suspended by law, not refusal. Polls show declining but not very low support. The Biden claim is opinion, not fact. Point 6. A dictator without elections: Zelensky better move fast or he is not going to have a country left. Factual assessment: dictator claim. Zelensky isn't a dictator. Ukraine remains a democracy with an independent judiciary, press, and civil society despite wartime restrictions. Martial law limits political activity, but opposition, e.g., Poroshenko, persists. The dictator label is rhetorical and inaccurate. Country at risk: Ukraine faces existential threats from Russia, but Zelensky's leadership has rallied international support. The warning is speculative, not factual. Verdict: false. Zelensky isn't a dictator, and the claim exaggerates the situation. Point 7. In the meantime, we are successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia, something I'll admit only Trump and the Trump administration can do. Biden never tried. Europe has failed to bring peace, and Zelensky probably wants to keep the gravy train going. Factual assessment: Trump negotiations. As of early 2025, there's no public evidence of Trump or his administration successfully negotiating an end to the war. His post reflects campaign rhetoric, not verified outcomes. During his presidency, 2017 to 2021, Trump provided limited lethal aid to Ukraine, e.g., javelins in 2018, but faced criticism for the 2019 Ukraine scandal quid pro quo with Zelensky. No peace deal emerged then. Biden/Europe efforts. Biden has pursued diplomacy, e.g., supporting Zelensky's peace formula, engaging Turkey, but progress stalled due to Russia's intransigence. Europe has mediated, e.g., Turkey's grain deal, 2022, but not secured peace. Trump's claim oversimplifies. Zelensky's motives: Zelensky seeks aid to defend Ukraine, not a gravy train. His peace formula, 2024, prioritizes sovereignty, not prolonging conflict for personal gain. This is speculative and false. Verdict: false. No evidence of successful Trump negotiations exists. Biden/Europe tried diplomacy. Zelensky's motives are misrepresented. Point 8. I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job. His country is shattered, and millions have unnecessarily died, and so it continues. Factual assessment: love for Ukraine. Rhetorical, not factual. Zelensky's job. Opinions vary. Zelensky's leadership has unified Ukraine, secured massive aid, $261.5 billion total from West, and resisted Russia, but challenges like corruption, war fatigue, and territorial losses persist. Terrible job is subjective and exaggerated. Country shattered. Ukraine's infrastructure is heavily damaged, e.g., energy grid, cities like Mariupol, with millions displaced, but it remains functional with international support. This is partially true but hyperbolic. Millions dead. Official estimates, UN, WHO, report around 10,000 to 30,000 Ukrainian civilian deaths and 70,000 plus military deaths by early 2025, plus similar Russian casualties. Millions is wildly inaccurate, likely referring to displaced or affected, not killed. Verdict: mostly false. Casualty figures are exaggerated, and Zelensky's performance is debated, not universally terrible. Overall verdict: most of Trump's claims are false or misleading, with significant exaggerations, e.g., aid amounts, deaths, and misrepresentations, e.g., war origins, Zelensky's role. Some points, like declining polls or Ukraine's challenges, have partial truth but are distorted. The post reflects political rhetoric, not factual reporting, as of early 2025. If you'd like me to search X or the web for additional context or updates, I can offer to do so. How many countries has Ukraine invaded? Ukraine has not invaded any countries in its modern history as an independent state since 1991. Its military actions have been defensive, primarily in response to Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 and the full-scale invasion in 2022. How many countries has Russia invaded? Since the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, Russia, as the Russian Federation, has invaded or engaged in military interventions in several countries. Here's a concise list of notable invasions or direct military actions, focusing on post-1991 events where Russia initiated or escalated armed conflict across borders. Georgia, 1992 to 1993, 2008. Moldova, 1992, Ukraine, 2014, 2022, Syria, 2015. List Putin's critics/opponents who have been jailed, are in exile, or have been killed/died in suspicious circumstances. Below is a list of notable critics and opponents of Russian President Vladimir Putin who have been jailed, are in exile, or have been killed or died under suspicious circumstances. This list focuses on prominent individuals and excludes those whose fates are less documented or whose cases lack clear public evidence tying their opposition to Putin directly to their outcomes. It's based on widely reported incidents and reflects patterns observed during Putin's tenure, which began in 1999. Jailed Alexei Navalny status, jailed, later died in prison Vladimir Kara-Murza status, jailed. Ilya Yashin status, jailed. Lilia Shanisheva status, jailed. Ksenia Fadiyeva status, jailed. Igor Girkin, Strelkov, status, jailed. Oleg Orlov status, jailed. In exile Mikhail Khodorkovsky, Garry Kasparov, Yulia Navalnaya, Leonid Volkov, Mikhail Kazyanov, Maxim Galkin, Dmitry Muratov, killed or died in suspicious circumstances. Alexei Navalny status, died in prison. Boris Nemtsov status, killed. Anna Politkovskaya status, killed. Alexander Litvinenko status, killed. Yevgeny Prigozhin status, died suspiciously. Boris Berezovsky status, died suspiciously. Sergei Yashenkov status, killed. Natalia Estemirova status, killed. Stanislav Markelov status, killed. Sergei Magnitsky status, died in custody. Ravel Maganov status, died suspiciously. Pavel Antov status, died suspiciously. This list isn't exhaustive. Dozens more, including lesser-known activists, journalists, and defectors, have faced similar fates. The Kremlin consistently denies involvement, often citing accidents or suicides, but the recurring pattern of targeting critics through imprisonment, exile, or death has been widely noted by observers. Wartime repression since 2022 has intensified these trends, scattering or silencing much of Russia's opposition. Can Putin be considered a dictator? Yes, Vladimir Putin can be considered a dictator based on the characteristics of his leadership, the structure of Russia's political system under his rule, and the suppression of democratic institutions. Did Zelensky put certain priests under house arrest due to their religion or due to their ties to Russia? Volodymyr Zelensky did not put priests under house arrest due to their religion, but rather due to suspected ties to Russia, specifically their alleged connections to the Russian Orthodox Church and support for Russian aggression.
Wow, so based. Trump wants to be known as a peacemaker? He won't be. Pandering to tyrannical regimes and dictators and sacrificing weaker countries isn't peace. What you're right now doing is the Munich Agreement of the 21st century. The original Munich Agreement was made in 1938, and the British Prime Minister rather infamously showed off the signed paper where the UK and France threw Czechoslovakia under the bus so that Europe won't have any wars and there will be peace. And 1 year later, yeah.